Hello, Gary. Thanks very much for joining me again on the show.
My pleasure, Karl. Repeat offender. It's not my first, second, or even third time. I don't think it's
No,
probably
I
five or
think
six now. I don't know.
I think we're heading towards double figures, and I think it's about 12 months since you were on previously, so I thought it was more than time again. But what prompted it, Gary? That we had a conversation recently, and surprisingly, you reminded me that it's now just over 6 years since we published, or the lost art of putting was published, which is, but first of all, it's incredible that 6 years has disappeared so quickly. But
Isn't it just?
what are your thoughts on 6 years down the line after we wrote down those ideas in the book? Where do you feel on what we talked about then? How's that sort of evolved in your mind?
Good question. When we wrote the book, we were pretty strong in our beliefs that this was another way to look at putting, another way to frame how you perceive putting, how you go about it. And we were pretty confident that there's something in there for sure, because we'd had a bit of success with various schools and master classes, clinics, whatever at Archfield, and we believed that there was definitely something there. And 6 years down the line, I would say about 50% of my coaching is now putting and the mental game, and so if nothing else, it'd be great business cards. So it certainly stirred up some interest. But yeah, I now believe more than ever that this is just a great way of freeing up the body and mind to allow the real creative artists to come out. And virtually everyone I've worked with, I've not seen anyone get worse.
No.
Let's put it that way. And I get lots of emails and messages saying thank you very much. I had my best ever putting round today, and my handicap's come down, and I've not really worked on my swing. I've stopped working on that, and I've stopped doing this. I've really just focused on my putting. And the one thing, as we kind of thought would be the key breakthrough, would be focusing more on pace.
Mm, mm.
That seems to have unlocked so many people's brains and bodies and just allowed them to think, well, ultimately pay more attention to what the ball's doing rather than what the person or the putter are doing.
Yeah. And we'll certainly come on to pace, Gary, but my sort of observation of it, when sort of go, as we both these days don't spend anywhere near as much time, thankfully, I would say, at tour events.
Yes.
When we do make an odd sort of guest appearance there at these events, and I see people on putting greens, and there's lots of gadgets and contraptions and technology and all the rest of it, which we've never ever said that doesn't have its place. We've
No,
never
I never will.
we never will. We've never said that doing some work on improving your path and face and all those kind of things don't have validity. But my take on it, Gary, watching people do that more than anything else, essentially, is it seems really quite boring and not much fun. Would that be something that you've sort of encountered as well?
I could not agree more. I mean, I never really used to enjoy coaching putting because I found it boring.
Mm.
I didn't really enjoy practicing putting a great deal in the past, in years gone by, because it was boring and my attention would wander because I got so tied up in the technicalities of it. And, you're tripping over wires and boards and mirrors and all sorts of stuff, moving from hole to hole in the putting green. But ultimately, it wasn't really holding my attention. So my attention would wander.
Mm.
And as my attention wandered, my ability diminished. But I always blamed it on my stroke. I always blamed it on my technique
Mm.
without realizing that my technique had absolutely nothing to do with it. Well, it did have a little bit to do with it, but the main culprit was my attention was wandering. I
Mm.
wasn't tuned into what I was doing.
Mm.
But when you're tuned into actually what you're trying to do with the ball, the question we ask is, what does a good putt look like?
Yeah.
Is it possible this ball could go in? And I think the language you use is really quite important.
Mm.
Is it possible this ball could go in?
Mm.
What does a really good version of this putt look like? Not a putt, but this putt. Because when we talk about this putt, we're really focusing on the here and now. Everyone's you've got to be present. You can't be in the past, you can't live in the future. So that's being absorbed in this putt by definition
Mm.
brings you into the present moment.
Mm. And essentially, as you say, what we're trying to do to get good at putting in a competitive sense is that that we've got to solve a unique puzzle in a unique moment that we've never had before and we're never going to have again. This particular putt, we have to predict what it's going to do based on one attempt, don't we?
Yes.
And to predict what it's going to do based on one attempt, as far as I can see, you have to be really interested in what the ball's going to do,
Yes.
as opposed to what you're going to do to make the ball go towards the hole.
Yeah. So one of the main questions we asked in the book, and we cover in the digital download program, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is, does the stroke create the putt, or does the putt create the stroke?
Mm.
Now, as 10 people, 9 will say straight away, well, the stroke creates the putt, obviously. And then I kind of say, if I'm in a practical situation, I'll say, okay, so does a 2-foot flat straight putt and a 32-foot downhill left to right, or am I going to use the same stroke for well, no, that's ridiculous. Of course you're not going to use the same stroke. So the putt or the situation or the intention will then form the movement rather than the other way around. Mm. So the intention to do something, whether it's pick up a cup of tea, tie your shoelaces, hit a putt, hit a 6-iron, hit a drive, that's what drives the movement. Mm. That's where the movement is that's the origin of the movement. Yeah. Because without that, without a clear intention, you have no starting point. You have no point A. Where'd you go? Mm.
And it's amazing how well the body can organize around that clarity of intent, isn't it?
Absolutely. One of the exercises I get people to do or ask people to do is imagine you've got a flat, straight 3-foot putt and ask them to close their eyes and relative to that putt to make a bad stroke. Mm. And the first reaction is, make a bad stroke? Well, what do you mean make a bad stroke? Well, make a stroke that's not appropriate to this putt. So they start to take it way inside or outside, but then on the through stroke, the brain doesn't like it at all. So it starts to then reorganize, recalibrate, and it self-corrects to a degree. But to a very large degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things, Gary, that's really worth exploring that I've found is that I think people when they start to struggle with the putting, they get very perfectionistic. They think that the start line has to be perfect and the stroke has to be perfect. And we both know there's certain tolerances that you've got to work within. We know that, but a very liberating image is what we call, or we did call in the book, the 3-ball highway. The idea that if your pace is correct, or if your pace is good, if it's pretty much at dead weight, that 3 balls will actually fit into the hole. And then all of a sudden, when you see that your task is to send it down a channel that's 3 balls wide, all of a sudden the perception of what you have to do changes completely, doesn't it? You don't have to be perfect anymore. You have to just tune into your pace, and it's amazing how good the hole can start to be at grabbing the ball if the pace is better.
Yeah, because effectively the target's bigger. And we talk a lot about green reading, and the more open-minded, the more creative people, in fact, the younger most people are. I did this for a young Danish kid I worked with for a few years. He's a great lad. He's a really good player. And we were talking about slopes, how do we read greens? We're looking for slope, we're looking for distance, we're looking for all sorts of different things. And he said, yeah, right, okay, so I can actually use that slope to help my ball into the hole. Whereas the older we get, because we've had whatever kind of experiences, we almost view slopes as deterrents.
Yes.
They're like a goalkeeper in there trying to keep the ball out of the hole, rather than actually using the slope to help you get the ball into the hole. So, looking at it through a child's eyes, we talked a lot about in the book about being more childlike than childish. So through the eyes of a child, they just see things differently. They're refreshingly so.
And then again, you're engaging your imagination, aren't you, potentially? And you're seeing that the slope, the break is allowing you to create a putt. It's allowing you to create a channel with which you can send the ball down. And I think for me, watching people practice, that there is so much science involved and there's so much trying to perfect the stroke at the loss of then an artistic
Yes.
imagination and creativity. And we both said this, to actually just go out at night, well, it doesn't have to be at night, but just to go out and engage your imagination and see what images resonate for you on
Yeah.
lots of individual puts from lots of individual places can really liberate your enjoyment of putting. And all of a sudden the putting can become much more of an adventure as you step onto a green, rather than something to fear and avoid.
Absolutely. It should not be a chore.
Mm.
When people say, well, back to the grind, I'm going to grind out, I'm going to get back grinding on the putting green. If it's a grind, you're doing the wrong thing. It's not working for you, because it should not be a grind. It should be something that you enjoy. I was speaking to someone about this the other day, and we were talking about the importance of putting and how that's what really gets our emotions going. You don't see anyone punch in the air and high five no because they hit a fairway, or they knocked a 6 iron to 30 feet, or they hit a wedge close. You don't see anyone fist pumping when they do that. When they roll a putt, absolutely. When do people cheer the loudest? When they're watching golf tournaments? When the ball goes in the hole, that's generally in the putting green as a result of a good putt. So it's vastly overlooked and underrated. I mean, years ago, I was coaching abroad as in Austria, and one of the first jobs I had to do was teach a load of kids, school kids, I think it's from 9 in the morning till 1 o'clock, for Monday to Friday for 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, talk about draining. That was quite a challenge. And the first couple of days, we gave the kids a 7 iron or whatever and asked them, showed them how to grip, stand, swing the club a little bit. And within about 20 minutes, we probably lost engagement from about 50% of them because they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They couldn't do it every time. So they became totally disinterested, totally disenchanted, sat down, didn't want to do it. So we thought, right, this has got to change. So I think on day 3, we thought, right, what we'll do, we'll take them to the putting green. They all get a putter and a ball, and we start from a foot away and give them the task. Can you use this putter to get that ball into that hole? Oh, I could do that. Of course I can. And even if they didn't get it right first time, they didn't miss by much. So within 2 or 3 attempts, they're starting to hold putts, and they're experiencing success. They're experiencing a nice outcome. They're experiencing what they want to happen. Next day, did this with all the groups. Next day, right, we're going to go to range. No, can we not do more putting? Can we do more putting, please? They just wanted to hold more putts. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And one of the kids who was there, I think I have the video from that, and that was going back. That was 1991. 10 years later, he was playing on tour. A kid called Martin Vigeli, an Austrian lad.
I remember the name. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a very good putter. And he said, "I loved putting from day one."
Yeah.
So it's I think golf is taught or coached the wrong way around. We should start at the hole and work our way back. I really do.
Yeah. And there is so much more engagement with that then, isn't there?
Totally.
So as we talk about in the book, Gary, to put line and pace, obviously you need both of those to hold a putt. But we firmly believe that there's so much emphasis on line at the expense of pace. And for many club players, the quickest way of reducing your scoring dramatically would be to 3-putt less, and the quickest way to three-putt less wouldn't necessarily to be get your line an awful lot better. It would be to improve your pace control. What have you found have been some of the best drills for people to work on if they were going to embark on the quest of improving the pace on the greens? What are some of the things that you found most beneficial?
I think before we get to that, the best, people say, well, I understand that pace, okay, so pace is important. Line's important as well, but I don't believe that line's the first port of call, because pace determines line. There's 100 ways to hold a putt, but you've got to get the pace right before you can even think about getting the line. You choose a line appropriate to the pace, whereas that should be the way it's done if you think about it logically. If pace is more important, let's place a little bit more emphasis on that, pay a bit more attention to it. You know, it's like, you know, you choose a line, then you decide how hard you're going to hit it. That's the way that most people work. But I find if we flip that on its head and we decide how hard we're going to hit it, and then we choose a line appropriate to that pace, then all sorts of amazing things can happen. And people say, well, how do I get better at pace then? And it sounds like a really flippant answer, and it's really not meant to be, and it isn't. You pay attention to it. You know, because most people are pretty good at line. They're a lot better at line than they think they are, but a lot worse at pace than they think they are.
Yeah.
So if you miss a putt from 12 feet, 2 feet left or right, you would think, oh my God, that's terrible. But if you miss it 2 feet short or 2 feet long, that's a great putt. I just didn't quite get the pace right. Yeah. They're still the same distance from the hole.
Yeah.
But because we're kind of preconditioned to relate everything back to line, if we miss it left or right, that's terrible. Short or long, that's a great putt, just the wrong pace. But if pace is more important than line because it determines the line, then it's kind of back to front and the wrong way around. So drills we can use, you know, the ladder drill, which we talk about in the book and in the digital program, which is one of my favorite exercises. But also to kind of not ignore the line completely, but just really focus on, can you hit this ball the correct distance? Can you get your putter to roll the ball the correct distance? And don't take 3 balls to the putting green. Don't take 4 balls or 5 balls, because if you've got 3 balls sitting there, how much attention are you going to pay to the first one? No, you've got a second chance and a third one. We do not have that luxury on the golf course. You know, the last time I checked, you're allowed 1 attempt. And if you missed, you had another attempt until you got it in the hole. So, you know, you mentioned the art of prediction, predicting what the ball's going to do. Once you've hit the first one's a bit of a rangefinder.
Yeah.
And we leave it 2 feet short. So what do? We don't want to leave the next one short. So we don't like to make the same mistake 2 times in a row. So we knock it 2 feet past. So we're not really predicting anymore. We're learning.
We're adjusting now.
Absolutely. So by the time we hold the third one, you know, we think we've cracked it. No, it's not how it works. And even just putting to the edge of the green from the middle of the green, or putting to a tee, you don't always have to involve the hole.
No.
So just, yeah, and again, it sounds a bit flippant to say you get better at pace by paying attention to it. Most people are pretty good at line because they pay attention to it, but at the expense of pace.
I found a really good one is to get somebody to go out and hit 9 to 18 putts from different locations, and you're not allowed to read the putt. You're not allowed to sort of look at it or anything like that in terms of line. You basically just got to walk up to it and aim to judge the pace. And it's amazing how something within most people's subconscious mind, of course, has read the putt to some degree before they step into it. But by tuning into just pace alone, it's amazing how much more attuned, as you say, they become to pace. And the line is never that far away, is it? It's amazing that we give so much attention to it, and you see people looking from 15 different angles, and they're getting down and they're trying to, you know, aim point and all the rest of it that they're trying to put into the mix of trying to be perfect with all that. But it's amazing how efficient many people are just by freeing them up to just say, okay, all I want you to do is get the pace right on this putt.
Yeah. I mean, another exercise that we've done in schools together is, you know, you throw someone a ball and ask them to throw it back to you, and you stand 6 feet away. And, you know, if you don't catch it, it's going to hit you pretty much right in the sternum, because that's the biggest part, that's the biggest target, if you like. Then you throw it back to them and move 10 feet away in a different direction. And they throw it to you, and it's going to land pretty much in exactly the same place again. Then you move 20 feet away and they throw it, and it's pretty much always right in the middle of your chest. And it's, you know, it's traveling at the right pace. You know, no one's going to lose any teeth or eyes when they're throwing the ball back and forward. So instinctively, we kind of know what we're doing. And we know what we need to do. You know what we should do. But if you start, I often say to people, right, we can do this and rely on your instincts, or we can spend an hour working on your technique, and you probably get worse. Or I can give you a task. Here's a ball. Just work your way around the putting green and really pay attention. I'm going to go for a cup of tea. You go and figure out what you need to do. You'll get better than if I stand here and tell you how to move your arms, shoulders, eyes, align yourself. You know, how you go through all the technicalities, they're going to get worse because they don't want to get it wrong. I think that's the biggest fear, is we don't want to get it wrong.
Mm.
We're not trying to get it right. We're trying not to get it wrong.
Mm.
Big difference. You know, a question I often ask is, are you trying to hold putts? Are you trying not to miss them?
Mm.
While they sound similar, they're actually poles apart.
Yeah.
And the majority of people, if they're honest, which most people are in this kind of situation, say, well, I'm actually trying not to make too much of a mess of it. I'm trying not to leave myself too much on the next one.
Mm.
Even from 4 feet, 5 feet, I'm trying not to knock it 3 foot past. I'm trying not to leave it short. Okay,
Big difference between trying to pursue rolling a ball into the hole as opposed to avoiding taking three putts.
absolutely. Yeah.
And a different set of chemicals going through our system as a result of that.
Mm.
In the book, in fact, all three books that we put together in the Lost Art series, I think we're both of the opinion that the cornerstone still of a lot of it, if not all of it, is the three words: intention, attention, and attitude. And whilst they sound three simple words and simple concepts, there's many levels of depth, I think, within those three words.
Yeah.
Would you, sorry?
They're like onions. There's lots of layers
There's
to
lots of layers, yeah. Hopefully, it don't make you cry too often, but I mean,
it.
there is that depth of layer. But I think, again, for me, underpinning everything is the attitude, and the attitude one of acceptance, of being
Yes.
willing.
Yeah.
The fact is, no matter what you do in terms of any route you choose to go down, whether it's more the technical route or what we're talking about, nothing will ever protect you, will it, from the
No.
fact that there is a variety of outcomes on every putt that you hit,
Yeah.
and every outcome is open.
Yes. Well, basically, there are two outcomes. It either goes in or it doesn't. You know, these are basically, if you strip it down to what the outcomes could be, yeah, it might go 3 feet past, 2 feet left, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's either going in or it's not. And, you know, we talk a lot about acceptance because it's so important. But realistically, if you don't and can't accept an outcome, what are your options?
Yeah.
You know, you've got to, ultimately, you're going to have to accept that that has happened, whatever the outcome. And the sooner we can get our heads around that, the better. You know, as you say, there is absolutely nothing in the world that's actually going to protect you from a bad stroke or a bad outcome. You know, with all the gadgets in the world put together, all the advice in the world put together, nothing's going to create a force field around you that's going to protect you from bad outcomes. Because, you know, we've seen it where a ball looks like it's tracking at the hole and it hits something, and it can't miss, yet it does miss.
Mm.
And then you hit a putt from exactly the same spot. I mean, I've done this with a robot test
Yeah.
where three balls were hit from the same spot to the same hole. And the putter's traveling, it's been released from the same point, traveling the same direction, same path, same face angle. Two go in and three don't,
Yeah.
in 5 shots. And then you do it the next time and four go in and one doesn't. How does that
How
work?
does that work? Yeah.
Yeah. So don't beat yourself. If a robot can't do it, then don't beat yourself up because you can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, once the ball's in motion, we've just got to let go. We can do absolutely nothing. You know, we can't control it. You know, I think I said to you fairly recently that control is a word I'm trying to remove or eradicate from my golf vocabulary because I'm not sure how much we can control in anything. You know, I've tried to replace control with influence. We can have a certain amount of influence over certain things, but control, nah, I'm not. You know, the longer I live, the less I believe we can control pretty much anything.
It's a stark reality of life, is that there's not an awful lot that we have actual got control over, is it? And I think the other word that I think many golfers would gain benefit from removing from the golfing vocabulary, which is should.
Yes.
You know, I should have I should have hold that, or
Yeah.
I should have made birdie. Well,
Should have
no.
I should have shot 63 this morning. Really? Based on what?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and you think of the stories that then are created around the should-isms.
Yeah.
That I should have made birdie there. I should have
Yeah.
made. hold that 3-footer or whatever. But then, as you say, what's the option of not accepting? The option of it is creating a reaction to what's just happened, the reality of what's just happened,
Yeah.
and then that contaminating the next tee shot or the next hole or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And again, we've said it both said it many times. The key thing for me to understand with acceptance, it's not resignation, is it? You're not giving up. It
Anything but.
doesn't mean that you're any less engaged in trying to knock the putts in.
No.
But you're willing to deal with reality.
Yeah. Yeah. The person who can deal with any kind of outcome is the person who is ultimately going to succeed.
Mm.
The better we can deal with outcomes, the better, the more accepting we become of outcomes that are out with our control. That's how you make progress. Mm. You know, we should, when you're thinking about something that should have happened, where are you? You're in the past. Mm. Now, you can't influence something positively in the present when you're still dwelling on something in the past. You know, as you and I have often said, you know, I think you introduced me to the concept of the brain being brilliant at time travel. It loves to dwell on the past. I should have done this. I could have done that. Love to project into the future. If this happens, if that happens, what about the middle bit, the present? Mm. You know, if you're dwelling in the past and projecting into the future all the time, I think that the worst part of that is you're actually missing out on the present experience. Mm. You know, what do we remember in life? Experiences.
Yeah.
So if you're not present to that experience, you can't enjoy it, which is quite sad, really. Mm. Because we all love the experience of striking a putt or a ball out the middle of the club face, whether it's a driver, a 6-iron, or a putter. You know, we love that feeling, that sound. But if you're not present to that, you're going to miss out on it.
No, if you're in your head trying to do a bunch of things with your body, you're not present to the actual experience of the putt, are you?
Not even close. Not even close.
It reminds me of, and he sadly passed away recently, the former England football coach Sven-Göran Eriksson. Mm. And I remember reading years ago one of the phrases that one of his assistant coaches, Willie Rilo, used to constantly.
Okay. Yeah.
Willie Rilo used to constantly reinforce to the players, you've got to be prepared, you've got to dare to lose. And,
yes.
You know, and I think that's a great one with putting, in the sense that if you're okay and you know that you can deal with missing the putt, you're 100% free to hold it then, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If you give yourself permission to miss it, then you can deal with the outcome. Yeah. Because you've already pre-loaded that acceptance. Mm. Excuse me. Mm. But if you don't do that, the way you deal with missed putts is going to be totally different and detrimental. It's not going to be helpful.
Yeah. I think again, another thing that we've talked many times in the past about is that the famous putt that Langer missed to win the Ryder Cup all those years ago at Kiowa Island, and you know, that not only is he was. Not only was he riding on that putt himself, but a whole continent's riding on it as well, and he missed that putt and then went and won was it the German Masters the week after?
German Masters in Munich, or I think it was. And he won it by about 9 shots or something, didn't he?
I think it was 7 shots, wasn't it?
7 shots, yeah.
You know, maybe the greatest example of acceptance in the history of the game, because I know Langer's a man of a deep faith, but he'd obviously been able to look at it and thought, well, I did everything I could on that particular putt. I hit a good putt. It didn't go in.
No, and he's been asked, would you have done anything differently? He said, no, I still think that was the line. I still believe that was the line and that was the pace. Mm. It just didn't go in. I'm sure if you went back and tried it another 3 times, you might hold it twice.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But to have the mental fortitude and strength to, fly across the Atlantic, which is hard enough, and readjust the time zone, because they were on, there's maybe a 5 or 6 hour time change. And they probably didn't fly home till the Monday, so he probably wouldn't have got to the golf course till the Wednesday or something. So he may not even have had a practice round. But we went out and shot I can't remember the numbers he shot, but they were at least 7 shots better than the next person.
They were good enough to get the job done of winning that weight.
Yeah, by some considerable distance, exactly.
And
Yes.
then you look at him as a great example. His longevity in the game. Yes, he's kept himself fit. He still hits it great and all the rest of it. But I firmly believe that clearly his level of acceptance of outcomes has been so strong that I think that's been a major factor in his incredible time span of playing great golf over so many decades and
Yeah.
and still being competitive even at nearly 70.
Mm. I mean, he shoots his age regularly.
Mm.
I know lots of people who are fit and strong at that age, but couldn't come close to competing with him because they don't have the same skills, mental skills that he possesses. And that is, yes, as you say, he doesn't physically doesn't really look any different to how he did 30 years ago. But he's had some knocks in his life. He's not won everything. Not everything's turned out exactly as he would have hoped, liked, or planned. But he's dealt with it. Going back to the person who deals with these, excuse me, outcomes the best is the person who makes the most progress. It's not like he doesn't care. He probably cares deeply.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do it. He wants to do it. He wants to go out and win. He's. I don't think he has ever shown up to a golf tour in the last 30, 40 years just to make up the numbers.
No.
He's going out there with one intention. He's not trying to make the cut. He's not trying to finish top 30, top 20, top 10. He's out there to win. And all the greats in sport, in life, in business, they've had that great desire to win. I spoke to Sven-Göran recently, and I said, if there's one bit of advice, what would it be? He said, well, there's 3 things I would ask a young professional sportsman to pay attention to or have in their thoughts. Dream big, play to win, and never give in. There's a lot of wisdom there. Dream big. What does that mean? Well, you're there to win. You're not there to, if your dream is to get on tour and you achieve that, then where do you go from there? You're going to have to change that. You're going to have to readjust and adapt. You're going to have to think, right, okay, is this the dream? It's maybe not what I thought it was going to be. And if you're setting your ceiling at a certain level and you reach that, then where do you go from there? So there's nothing wrong with aiming for the very top and come up a little bit short. But if you aim to make the cut and you come up a bit short, you go home penniless and in debt for that week. But if you aim to win and you come up 2 or 3 shots short of it, you're probably going to go home quite happy.
Yeah.
Not initially, but on reflection, think, actually, that's a pretty good week. And, you're playing to win. You watch all the best sports people, athletes, having watched a lot of the Olympics recently, a lot more than I thought I was going to watch, became quite compelling. These people work so hard for 4 years, the 100 meters. It's over in less than 10 seconds. They work 4 years for that, for 10 seconds. Amazing. But none of them are going to just to make up the numbers, just to get an Olympic tracksuit and a new pair of trainers, or a new pair of spikes or whatever. They're going for medals.
Yeah. I think it comes back to that possible question, doesn't it? As we talk about in the book, that key question as you walk on the green. Is it possible I could hold this putt? So it's kind of developed, because the answer to that question is, unless you decide otherwise, is it possible I could hold this putt? Well, the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
So it's the possible question is an incredibly powerfully positive question.
Yes.
But underpinning this is a willingness to accept the reality of whatever outcome. So there's a pragmatism to the outcome that is, and that really keeps a strong balance then, doesn't it? You're dramatically optimistic before the putt, but pragmatic about any outcome.
Yeah. it was possible. It did quite happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, okay, nothing I can do about it now. I can bitch and moan about it, but that's not going to make the ball go in the hole any quicker.
Mm.
You know, is it possible the next one could go in? Absolutely. Okay, what does the ball need to do? Then you start the process all over again. So by asking these questions, people say, I don't really have a process. I don't really have a process. So I get them to, or we get them, we have asked to encourage people to ask these questions. And they don't realize that that is actually the trigger that starts the process.
Mm.
Because when they're asking about, is it possible this ball could go in, they're no longer thinking about the previous one or the previous hole or the last time I had a putt on the screens a week past Thursday and I left it 4 feet short. Well, if you're thinking about what you did a week past Thursday, that's got nothing to do with today. Absolutely nothing to do with today because it happened in a different time. Let's focus on this putt. Is it possible this ball could go into the hole? What does this ball have to do? And then all of a sudden you become again tuned in and absorbed in the task or process of getting the ball into the hole, which
And I
is
think
ultimately, it shouldn't really take an awful lot of skill.
no, but I think the other beauty of that as well, Gary, it's not those two questions. They're not a rigid routine. I'm not a massive fan of the idea of you've got to do exactly the same thing every single time physically and to the same second and all that kind of stuff. I think that can be very much overplayed.
And
But
that's when boredom sets in again.
yeah, you're doing a routine just for the sake of it. I
Well,
think
routines by definition are boring.
are boring. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Whereas this is almost not almost. It's kind of like a sacred ritual where you're engaging. You're fully engaged in solving this particular puzzle in this particular moment, aren't you? And I think that the great thing about those two questions are that they just increase your curiosity about what the ball needs to do in this particular moment.
Yeah. As we both know, the brain likes to reset
Mm,
frequently. And that's a great trigger to reset.
mm,
You know, focus on this task, not the previous one. Because most of the time we're not really concerned, pardon me, I believe about the outcome of a putt. We're more concerned about the repercussions of the outcome
yeah.
of a putt. You know, if this doesn't go in, I'll be through over par. I've only played 2 holes.
Mm,
If this doesn't go in and I knock it 3 feet past, I'm not very good at them. God, if I'd missed that one coming back as well. And then mentally, you start filling in your score. You're on the third green. You know, you start mentally from, okay, the next hole's downwind. That's a birdie chance there. The next one's a long par four into the wind today. It's a bit uphill on the ground. I don't know if I can reach that in two. God, I'll probably drop another shot there. Before you know it, you're mentally filling in your scorecard on the 18th green. You've not finished the third hole yet.
You've already shot 90 and you've only
You've
played three
already
holes.
shot 90. You've not even finished 3 holes yet,
Mm,
which is madness.
mm,
So it's not necessarily the outcome, but the repercussions of the outcome.
mm.
That's where the mind wanders to. So asking these questions, as we've talked about often enough over the years, questions focus your attention.
Mm, mm,
You know, yeah, I quite often do a couple of little attention tests and say, okay, do you think you can pay attention to something for a couple of seconds? Then we do the after image and of course I can pay attention to something for keep my attention in the same place for 2 seconds. Do the after image test and they fail miserably.
mm.
And they can't believe how hard it is to place and keep your attention in one place for a couple of seconds. It should be easy to do, but the world we live in, and the things we carry about in our pockets and phones and other devices, they are killers of attention.
Attention. Yeah.
They really are. Which, and I'm not as guilty as some, but I still find myself. You know,
Mm,
you pick up your phone, and before you know it, you're looking at something. You go to do something specific, then a message comes in, or a phone rings, or half an hour later, you forgot what you were trying to do in the first place or set out to achieve in the first place.
mm.
So questions, as we've often said, questions focus your attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
And I
not
think
statements.
no, there's a
Big difference.
big difference between statements and questions, and you can make all the statements you like I'm going to put well today, or this is going to go in, this is going to go in. Unfortunately, that runs then into reality where it doesn't go in, and you've got nowhere to go then other than a
Exactly.
negative spiral.
I'm going to hit every fairway. I'm going to hit every green. I'm going to hole every putt.
Mm.
And when none of that has happened, you go from, yes, so we'd encourage everyone to have a positive outlook, but the positive thinking thing will, and it just will let you down. It's as
Mm.
simple as that. You start off being very positive, then when you've not hit a fairway or a green or hold the putt after 6 or 7 holes, not done any of them,
Mm.
it's like snakes and ladders. You go from positive to the polar opposite. You're back at square one, negative as hell. You
Mm.
can't be a little bit positive. That that does not exist in the real world.
Mm.
If you're not positive by definition, you're going to be negative.
Yeah. Yeah.
By making these positive statements, they will let you down.
Mm.
But Dad told a great story years ago. A good friend of his, George Will, who played in the Ryder Cup in the '60s. George's a great guy, lovely man, and my dad had gone out to watch him, and he was shaking his head, and his head was down. Dad's, come on, George, be positive. He said, I'm being positive. I'm bloody positive. I'm going to miss everything. So I don't
Yeah.
think he was asking questions, or he certainly wasn't asking pertinent or good questions. That's for sure.
Yeah. It reminds me that of a wonderful story, and I'm sure it's like the fisherman's tale, it's grown legs, but it was told to me about the great Henry Cotton towards the end of his life. And when he was playing, he would play at Penina, and each day he would allow three people to he'd go out on the golf course with um, three members or one member or whatever. He'd set up a game every day, and apparently he's playing this particular day with a guy who was quite full of himself, and he wanted to have a match against Cotton and all the
Right.
rest of it.
That
And they
wasn't
got
very wise.
yeah, and they got to like the 14th or something like that, and Cotton rolled it up to 3 feet, and then just walked up and picked the ball up. And this guy said to me, he said, I haven't given you that putt. What are you doing? And apparently Cotton looked at him. He said, young man, he said, I believe that all of us have only got a certain number of 3 foot putts within us. He said, and I'm not about to waste this on an idiot like you. I'm just going to put him in his place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What thinking about the direction of travel with this, Gary? What would your overall message be for somebody who's perhaps been really struggling on the technical side of it? They've gone down that route and seem to be hitting some brick walls. What would be the first stage of perhaps coming over to see the other side?
I think first of all, gain an understanding of where your attention is. You know, essentially standing over any given putt, your intention will be in one of three places. What you need to do physically, what the putter needs to do, what the ball needs to do. Perhaps a combination of all three, but there'll be a hierarchy. And the majority of people I see for the first time, certainly, the majority of their attention, maybe 70% of their attention is on what they need to do. 20% might be on what the putter needs to do, and they might give 10% to what the ball needs to do. Now, the last time I checked, we weren't trying to get ourselves or a putter in the hole. We're trying to get the ball into the hole. So it might be worth tipping that upside down and paying a lot more attention to what the ball has to do. So, I often ask people, have you played any other sports? Oh, yeah, yeah. I played football. I played rugby. I played tennis. I played badminton, squash, whatever. Okay, what was your attention on? Well, the ball, obviously. And just let it hang there for a couple of seconds. And then, they tend to kind of look at the floor and go, yeah, okay, I should be paying a bit more attention to the ball then. I don't tell them that. They figure it out for themselves. And once they understand that it's all about what the ball has to do, I've done this often enough in group sessions, individual lessons, where at the end of the session they'll say, you didn't actually make any comment about my stroke. Well, no, because you were holding putts. Could you hold the amount of putts you have done in the last session with bad technique? Well, what do you mean bad technique? Exactly. What is bad technique? Bad technique won't allow you to get the ball into the hole. So there is no one perfect way to wield a putter. That's why there are so many variants, so many different grips, so many shaft lengths, so many shaft weights, so many head weights, so many head designs, putter grip thicknesses and lengths and all sorts of things. So it's about finding your way. I've often said I've worked with an awful lot of really, 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 really good putters over the years. Guys who hold putts in to win big tournaments, majors, played in Ryder Cups and whatever. And the one thing they all have in common is they all think they're good putters. They are at some stage they believe they are good putters, and they've all found their way of doing it.
Yeah.
They all do it their own way. So it's about finding your way of doing it. But I think the first port of call is to pay a lot more attention to what the ball has to do, and let your brain and body, which are very, very clever, advanced pieces of kit, if you let them get on with it. If you just stay out of the way, as we've often said, that based around a clear intention, your brain and body will start to organize the appropriate movement that's required to perform the task. And putting should be fun.
I think that's a great finishing point, really, about actually beginning to enjoy it. What strikes me, again, when I've been at tournaments, is that you see people walking around greens and it looks like they're about to embark on a heart surgery rather than trying to hold up. There's such seriousness attached to it. Now, I know you can say on the one hand, yeah, they're playing for a lot of money and prestige and all the rest of it, but being overly serious and so focused on the seriousness of it doesn't actually create the foundations or the opening to actually hold the putts, does it?
Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. And I know I sent you when I was across at the Scottish Open at Renaissance next door to Archfield, where I am. I was across there on the Tuesday and Wednesday. And on the Wednesday, I think about 1 o'clock lunchtime, I took 2 photographs and sent them to you. One was of the range where you could not, there was room for one more person on the range, and it's a big, big range. And 10 yards away, there was a putting green, and there were maybe 8 people on the putting green, and at least 3 of them were caddies.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you, those who were on the putting green that day did quite well.
Yeah.
And there's 150 guys on the range at the same time who probably didn't do quite as well.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the putter is going to be used on pretty much every hole you ever play, unless you're a genius round the greens and you chip in a lot. But you're probably going to use it at least once on pretty much every hole. So you've got to become good friends with your putter. Your putter's got to be your best friend, and you've just got to learn how to use it. I was telling someone today, actually, my father came up with a brilliant bit of wisdom when I was about 12 years old. I had this old little Ben Sayers Benny Blade putter that I think I'd won in a competition around the little nine hole kids course at North Berwick. But I decided that I needed and wanted a ping answer, because I'd seen someone with a ping answer. I said, I'll probably save you using a ping answer. And I thought, that's what I need. Dad said, right, okay, so you need a new putter. I said, yeah, definitely a new putter. So I'll tell you what, I'll do you a deal. See, once you learn how to use that one, I'll get you a new one. Did I need or want a new putter once I learned how to use mine? No, of course not. Of course not. Yeah, so learn how to use the tool. Learn how to use the putter with the intention of getting the ball into the hole.
Yeah, and fall in love with the idea of what could be possible on the green.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's not a chore. It's not a grind. It should be a joy and fun. You and I both love going out to the putting green, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes, and just really becoming engaged in the art of putting.
Yeah. Just to go on the putting green, Link, at night in the summertime, just for the sake of being out there with one ball, rolling a bunch of different putts, and not trying to perfect anything, not trying to monitor every single movement that you're making and checking everything. No. It's just a wonderful experience. It's just a pleasurable experience in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, you can get totally lost in it.
Yeah.
Totally engaged, totally absorbed. It's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah. Well, it was a wonderful thing to write the book with you, Gary. The Lost Art of Putting, 6 years ago.
I know. Hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and we put together the digital program, the Lost Art of Putting as well, which is available on the website.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll at some point in the future there'll be more schools at Archerfield.
It's very much in my thoughts. It's the forefront of them. I think we'd love to do something in the spring, get you back up for a couple of days and you know, we've been very lucky. We've had people from all around the world come and join us for a couple of days. And, you know, if we've always said if those who attend have as much fun and take as much pleasure away from it as we do, then everyone's a winner.
Yeah. And the websites, Gary, where people can find about you?
Performanceprinciples.co.uk. And there's a lot of great information on the Lost Art of Golf website as well, lostartofgolf.com. And of course, your own, themindfactor.com, Karl.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary.
My pleasure. As always, I will speak to you soon, Karl.